Hello and welcome back to Excedo Playback, the podcast discussing industry news, trends, and tech advancements in the streaming and OTT industry. I'm your host, Neil Van Zyl. Today we'll be jumping into the future of TCO for OTT services. In this episode, we're going to speak with AWS and Merapar to explore how streaming services can move beyond cost-cutting to truly maximize the value of every dollar spent. Before we get started, just a couple of details. Near the end of the episode, we had some technical difficulties, so we lost some of the recording. But the full episode before that is fantastic, and so you won't really even miss it. But we just wanted to call it out in case it's a little bit odd at the end. Lastly, our VP of Business Transformation at Excedo, Bluen Legovic, is going to be leading this conversation. So without further ado, let's pass it off to Bluen.
Welcome everyone to Excedo Podcast Playback session. I'm super happy to be joined by two industry friends and to be talking about a very big topic around agentic AI and how this is actually moving our media and entertainment industry. Don't worry too much. We're not going to talk only about the specificities of media and entertainment. We're going to talk about, of course, how agentic AI and AI in general is changing the overall concept of investing into software and technology across industries. And I think today with Simon and Michael, I'm very excited to be able to sort of decipher a bit how as vendors, of course, of the ecosystem, but most important as big enterprise, we need to think about this. And of course, we're so close of media and entertainment that we'll certainly use some examples of the media and entertainment industry today. So without further ado, I'll get started. So my name is Bluen Legovic. I'm VP Business Transformation for Excedo. And I'm looking after the overall portfolio strategy, and I've been investigating the overall power of AI for the last 2 years or so, and really looking forward to the amount of opportunities that this has created for our industry. And I'm very happy to be here with Simon and Michael. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Bluen. I'm Simon McGrath. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you, Bluen, and with you also, Michael. Good to see you. Recently, of course, we were all together in Amsterdam for a very interesting and successful IBC show, I thought. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Merapar Technologies. We're a global consulting software company that specializes almost exclusively in media and entertainment, broadcast and streaming.
Awesome. Well, it's great to see you both again. It feels like just a couple of days ago we were all together in Amsterdam. But I hope you guys did not get the cold that half of my team members seemed to get. I noticed everybody was sniffling by the end of it. Late nights and hard work, I think, were the source of that. But so Michael Schmidt is my name. I look after industry partnerships here at AWS, and I look across a lot of different industries. And of course, media and entertainment is my absolute favorite.
Yeah, thanks a lot both for joining. So I think we've been discussing that for months together, and I think I wanted to mention two key indicators I think that I've picked at IBC. The first one was a panel of CTOs, usually the case in our engineering-driven industry. Talking about their investment into AI and their actual application. And what's very interesting here is that it felt, I'll make another point later on, but it felt like from experimentation last year, which was a bit about we've tried this, we've tried that, this became operational. So suddenly ITV, which is a UK broadcaster, and so Warner Bros. Discovery was the other company represented on that panel, were actually talking about 250 use case across their value chain, which was leveraging AI. So the first feeling I got was, okay, so does it mean that is it not now cracked? Have the media, because we were in the media and entertainment conference, has the media industry then cracked the use of AI and is already operationally quite advanced? So before I get to the second point, I wanted to ask you, did you feel that from other conversation, or are they? We know that some of those companies are very advanced, right? We know that some are obviously very very versed in onboarding new technologies. But what's your feeling, Simon? Maybe from your customer discussion.
So I had discussions with customers from right across the entire supply chain, from production through post-production through everything associated with moving content into a complied format ready for either broadcast or streaming or delivery onto any other platforms. And what I was hearing was that people were pulling out very, very specific point AI solutions to deliver very focused results. So not huge strategies, but not overarching platforms, but bringing in tools to do a specific job. One of them, obviously, a very big one is, if we think about the supply chain, to do with localization and compliance, subtitling, translation, dubbing, etc. And using tools which are really quite mature now in terms of helping that. And that's obviously been transformational there. And then what I was also hearing from customers was, at the consumer end, was how to be more dynamic and how to learn from the retail, from the e-commerce sectors, about how to truly value a customer and ensure that customer had a great experience on the service which they were providing. So, and how was AI going to help that, and where was the data coming from to drive those AI decision-making systems?
And that's very interesting, because I think, this is something that fundamentally AI is enabling, is really being able to pick throughout, the different industries, use cases, and actually transform that. So, Michael, if you, knowing your remit, and I do think that you've been recently with other industries in actually their respective shows. Do you feel the maturity level, as Simon described, right? Maybe operational, but maybe point solution operational. It's one use case after one use case. Is that common to all industries?
Definitely. I think Simon's point is a really interesting one, is that I've seen a lot of customers, partners looking at opportunities to use AI for very specific jobs and very specific tasks and very specific opportunities to kind of really improve efficiency and increase hyper personalization and things like that. It was interesting, your point about learning from other industries, and particularly on the retail side of things. That to me certainly stood out too. I also spent a lot of time with some of our retail colleagues actually after we were in Amsterdam, and definitely looking at a lot of the analytics, supply chain, making good decisions around advertising placements based on diverse data sources, and looking at things like pricing models and very sophisticated ways of balancing, pricing decisions, merchandising decisions, but analytics in terms of all of the elements of what's going on with your customer to make better decisions was something that really stood out for me. One of the examples actually I saw on the retail front, which you might find interesting, and there's some good takeaways for this, was I was talking to a customer that had a fairly traditional sort of retail supply chain example and dynamic pricing and analytics around merchandising and stuff, which was pretty interesting. One of the things they said to me is, we were working with a concrete supplier. And the funny thing about concrete is you can only make concrete on certain days. It's very weather dependent. And some days are 2-day jobs and some days are 3-day jobs. So they used an agentic composable architecture to be able to say, okay, we're going to look at the work that we have coming up, the 2, the 3, the 4-day jobs. We're going to use a separate agent to look at the weather in the coming month, and look at the staffing schedule, and an agent that looks at the staffing scheduling, and use sort of a multi-agent kind of architecture to manage the scheduling and ultimately manage the profit and loss of the business over the course of a month. I was like, wow, okay, that is a fairly simple sort of example, but I do think that there's a lot of lessons to take out of those sorts of examples to say, firstly, you can have a fairly traditional sort of workflow that can apply to a lot of businesses, But I think one of the strengths of composable architectures, and particularly agentic AI, is that it gives you an opportunity to pull in other data sources that are specific to your needs. So in this example, understanding weather for concrete production is quite interesting. But I think also, if I bring that back to our industry in media, taking into account, local conditions, events, specific, market events that are going on, marrying that up with your perhaps you're the type of content that you're using, or even the advertising that you're doing. Really the sky is the limit. And I think that was the big takeaway for me, is like there's a lot of value in thinking about how your architecture comes together, and being flexible enough to know that there's not necessarily a utopian end state of it being perfect. You can continue to integrate different data sources and different elements to sort of make it more sophisticated. And so that, again, for me, huge takeaway from what I'm spending time with the customers and partners at IBC, but also in the following week after that.
That's very interesting, because to me that means two things. The first thing is that there is a sentiment that there is you can rely on the technology. First of all, that means that it's ready, that you can start being operational with it, right? That I think some of the fear that we were hearing for the past 2 years around the adoption of AI and how would we do it and so on seems to have gone a little bit on the sides. It seems that all companies have decided that, okay, they need, most companies, I should say, they need to invest, and they need to investigate how that can enable them. So, but the two things that I take from what you both said is, one, what does it mean about the overall investment strategy into technology? Because I mean, at least in media and entertainment industry, when we buy software, right, or when we decide to invest into skills to build software, we actually are looking primarily about how to cover the critical business workflow, right? Which is, in the context of a streaming service, it's going to be, can you play a video stream at scale, right? Can you ensure that this is working properly? Or can you ensure that you have payment working? And on all, and we know, even if it sounds simple, it is not, eventually still not, to be able to do that at scale with a lot of constraint. But then that means that first the overall investment strategy was on evaluating, can you support this standard of streaming? Can you support this functionality? Can I tweak the monetization strategy or the payment strategy? But does it mean that we will see a shift in what will drive the criteria of procurement of software? Does it mean that suddenly all vendors, when they will be able to sell software, they will have to answer to how composable you are? So, I mean, and you use that term, Michael, and for the audience that might not be familiar with the terminology, composable architecture is really about the fact that you can make sure to decompose your overall software into very atomic functions, that you can make all these different components talking to each other without extreme dependency to ensure reliability. But also composable, it's meant to be data driven, so it's meant to be able to be feeding into a context that is larger than the scope of which this small atomic software component is meant for. So I am, and as you can hear, my engineering years are far behind me, but I hope that for the non-engineering one, I didn't scratch your ears too much. And for the engineer audience, I'm sorry for the definition. But eventually, this is what I think. Does it mean that we will see a complete different value proposition of the software vendor out there? What do you think, Simon?
Well, I think that's interesting. I think one of the things which is coming through, it's again listening to customers and also my colleagues, both in the vendor community as well as inside Merapar, the excitement about having some standards now coming through around interoperability of agents, of AI machines from different vendors. So allowing both for the upgrading for functionality or for cost reasons, or to mitigate against some of those companies going out of business and retiring their software, which could be critical in a workflow. So I was hearing a lot about the sort of standards for inter-agent communications and how they were sharing information about what each one could offer, what workload each one could take on. And as we've seen with some of the work we've been doing together, Bluin, in the Exido Compose, the opportunity for building out marketplaces involving multiple third parties for agents who bring something to the game. What I've heard is that the rise and the generational or the rapid development of FinOps as a very strategic role and function for software. So we will see, I think, many more agents who are saying, let's monitor how actually expensive this is. Going back 10 years, we were worrying about the Super Bowl and could we handle the peak load at certain moments? Could the DRM servers chuck out enough keys? And we focused on even though it was in the cloud, enough tin and enough compute to handle load. And we called it elastic because we could spin up and spin down instances and virtual machines. We never really worried about the cost. And I think now both the cost of the software as well as the cost of the infrastructure for doing this stuff is such that we can now monitor this, and agents will come through which are saying, for the right level of consumer experience, we need to do this, but it's going to cost this. And so we're going to have real-time cost awareness. And I think that's going to be really, really important. And, we're talking about the future of TCO here. I think that's super important, alongside the understanding and the rules of engagement that say what is good enough for the content that we're distributing. If it's the Super Bowl and it's 4K, we know what the standards are. If it's a live broadcast at 2:00 in the morning of something maybe not as popular as football, then maybe some of the parameters for delivery and consumer experience can drop and hence have an impact on cost. So I see all of this huge multidimensional sort of opportunities coming through as a result of this change. But it's kind of generational on from what we talked about a long time ago, microservices architectures, whereby we had services and infrastructures that were built for the specific task in hand. This is taking it to the next level.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's very, it is sort of familiar territory in that way, isn't it? And I agree with you. One of the things I was talking to a couple of different partners and customers over the last couple of weeks about, really that one of the strengths of agentic, not only just bringing in multiple data sources, but it also is distilling a lot of noise and a lot of data into sort of small trends, themes, decision points. And over time, those decisions will move up the stack. So, for instance, talking to customers about, being able to distill, key data points to be able to say, do we need to trigger extra capacity, or do we need to make some operational adjustments to how we're running our large-scale event? But to be able to trigger those decisions up into a dashboard to say, yes, we're going to do this, or no, we're not going to do that. Now, if you get to a point where 99% of the time you're saying, yes, just do the thing, then that decision is probably a decision an agent can make anyway, and you can bubble that decision up a level further. And my observation is, look, there's definitely that's a journey for a lot of people and a lot of customers to say, yeah, I don't necessarily want agents to make all of my decisions around sensitive things like FinOps or operations or whatever in the beginning. But as time goes on, we look at the quantity of decisions that our humans are making, which are fairly predictable. You say, okay, we can move it up the stack a little more. So I think there's an evolution of how people interact with agents and how the human to agent interface will end up being. So I think to me, that's super exciting. At AWS, my first role in AWS, I worked in a lot of the operational areas of how we run our infrastructure, and we used AI to manage a lot of the just low touch events that go on in infrastructure. And I saw the great example we have that we also do in Formula One, where we've been able to reduce the amount of operational or the time to resolve operational events by something like 80%. And it just means that you can take large volumes of minor events and just distill them down into kind of again, only bubbling them up to a human when it's absolutely necessary. And I think that's kind of where the power of the operational savings and the operational impact is going to be found, which is great.
This is, to me, I mean, reflecting on what is the biggest gain right now of the industry, right? In terms of, it's a bit difficult to say this at an industry level, but at least for each company to reflect on, what for, right? There was a customer, I can't give a name, but a North American streaming companies that had decided that they needed to automate all the release, everything related to making sure that all the release of their software, of their streaming platforms would be automatically tested, making sure that everything was under control and being far from the ad hoc type of releases that we do when we constantly have a product team that is delivering and so on. And the saving they had overall was, of course, eventually maybe on time of testing, because they had automated, but the biggest value was the prevention of revenue leakage in their customer care cost, because eventually their biggest problem was not the testing time, was not maybe the minor bug and experiences that they were having. They had quite veloz productivity and the right mindset for builders. But eventually, when you looked at the actual operational cost of this service out there live, and the fact that constantly users, because of the particular audience of this streaming service, and the fact that those minor issues were leading to a lot of customer care calls and a lot of requests had to be handled, this is where the gain was. And I'm sometime, I think we have been able to have a quite consistent focus in media and entertainment around, streaming security is 1 year. The next year is reducing cost on CDN, and we have those themes, right, regularly about, because we can see that the technology vendors have invested in a certain technology, and we can see that there is progress in one domain. But does it mean now that this will be a widening of the conversation? Because what I hear from both of you is that the sort of the scope of opportunities now has improved significantly, right? I mean, there is much more to be discussed than the usual pain point. And is that something that we fundamentally think is possible, or do we have the bandwidth to actually think about more than the usual 3-4 pain point as an industry?
I think we have to have the bandwidth, Bluin, and we have to use technology to give us that bandwidth. I don't know what you think there, Michael.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think that there's no sort of what I think is that the opportunity for us, particularly when it comes to for our OTT customers, is to really think about end to end as to where there's an opportunity to have an impact. The cost of acquisition of new subscribers is high. Looking at opportunities to reduce that and reduce the churn rate, using things like hyper personalization, tailoring your content to meet your market, tailoring your advertising to meet your market. Increasing the level of user engagement around the content, making it, putting it in their language in a way that's digestible for them, making it available in places where they wasn't available before. And then, of course, the cost optimization stuff that we've just been talking about, that is, also, table stakes. I think looking at ways of, reducing the amount of developer hours that go into any particular task, improving the way that operationally you deal with faults, change, scalability. Like there is a breadth of opportunities that are for OTT providers to really improve their business and ultimately their bottom line and ultimately their subscriber experience. I wouldn't want to limit to any one of them. I think you have to kind of like have a broad approach to this, Mike.
But and I think you're right, and that makes me thinking about the second point I wanted to mention about this panel of CTO is that maybe this has happened before, and I'm sorry for the people that have said that before, and I never heard about this before, but they both mentioned, those two CTOs from ITV and Warner Bros. Discovery, both mention repeatedly the term growth. And I mean, that's not part of the taxonomy of a CTO usually. Scale is, I mean, you can talk into a lot of different ways of thinking about the technology. But here, the CTOs were using a business first taxonomy, which to me is mind-blowing.
Absolutely. It goes both ways, Bluin, in that I don't think the board of any public company, of any public broadcaster or major entertainment business reaching a large population, I don't think the board would accept to have a CEO who does not understand what's happening in the technology world and how AI is going to affect their business, their cost infrastructure, their opportunities right across the board. I mean, I just cannot imagine a chairman of a board not asking a CEO saying, so what's your AI strategy in the business?
100%, Simon. I mean, that if you look at all of the, data that we see from industry analysts about, the way that particularly AI is going to change business generally, is that it's not an IT-led conversation anymore. It is a business-led conversation. So the idea that, it's going to be a bunch of kind of interesting features that the IT department are going to present to their line of business owners, I mean, that's just not the way the future is going to be. The strength of what AI is going to be able to do for our business is in the impact to our subscribers and how they experience their interaction with the business. That is going to be something that will be led by the line of business. It will be led by, as you said, the CEO needs to be deeply connected to what an impact and what an opportunity there is for his business to grow with AI. So I agree with you. It's a completely different mindset. I also agree with you, Bluin, is that, some of the language even that we hear some of our traditional stakeholders inside of our customers use and the way they're thinking about their technology strategy, and particularly when it comes to AI, is new, different. It's a different kind of conversation. So I think that's quite exciting. It means that we're not all just talking IT all the time, which is great.
It is. And can you imagine a consumer, an e-commerce or DTC company in which the CEO, CFO, CPO, CMO could not answer the question or look surprised if somebody says, what is a large language model? Because that goes to the heart of saying, what data have you got? What do you know about your customers? How are you going to use it? How are you going to drive value from picking out insights and making decisions based on the data you've got, and maybe third-party data you can augment it with to really make the services you provide cheaper and more compelling.
So true.
Imagine, I mean, we're sitting here very comfortable in our podcast and saying, okay, by the way, dear executives of the world, I can imagine that now you have a mission in front of you to actually draw a new investment strategy to be able to identify the overall outcomes that you want to achieve. And those have to be multi lenses, right? And they will have to cover all the business, and you're going to have to procure technology in probably a new way. And that's I can imagine, and I've seen a lot of companies related to that, which is it's not an easy task to do. I think you can put your guidelines on your AI strategy, you can put your ethics, you can put the guardrails of experimentation and operational enhancement, but really having this overall investment strategy in a 5 years business plan, to be able to start from the outcome, what you want to achieve, and drilling that down, I think is a major challenge. But if I summarize what you have said, one, first look at the data. What is the data that you have? Is that contextual? Is that accessible to your software in general, right? And it has to be across the value chain. It has to be bringing the full context. You mentioned about composable architecture, and that's probably a new characteristic, right, of the software of tomorrow. It has to be capable of interacting and with the rest of your existing software. And I suppose that, I mean, the art of the possible, right? Being able to free ourselves a bit from the feature or the small add-on that might move a bit the engagement lever. Maybe there is a lot more to be done, especially in the monetization side. I mean, both of you talked about everything related to dubbing, which is, I mean, the geographical expansion of media streaming must be now less of a hurdle, because before, getting your content to actually be translated and being accessible to other regions was quite a challenge and quite a cost, right? And you're saying now, Simon, that this is now being much more accessible. And Michael, you talked about contextual ads being capable of serving the right experience to your ad funded experience. I'm guessing, we just saw an announcement from OpenAI with the overall thinking of payment with Stripe on top of ChatGPT. I mean, there's going to be, I mean, the innovation pace on the monetization side and on the growth aspect is probably going to be fantastic. Where I don't think we've been that fast in that domain, pun non intended, obviously. But I think this is an area for us to look after as well in terms of monetization.
And here's the thing as well. There is, to your point about taxonomy, I was caught out very recently when a client of mine was using phrases which I'd never heard before. And this is an organization that has live events, it has a video streaming platform, it has merchandising as well. And linking that all up with a focus on where does our customer go throughout their entire experience of working with our brand is crucial for them. And they talked all the time in this meeting I had with them recently about the next best action, which is a common marketing phrase about consumer-orientated marketing. So using data to determine what's the next best action for the consumer as they're in the CRM system, as they're in the video streaming system, as they're looking to buy the T-shirt or whatever it may be. But the point I'm thinking here is that the video infrastructure, the OTT service, is going to be part of something bigger. And it's going to be about those consumer brands that take it out. And you asked at one before this, Bluen, how do we see the state of OTT today? And I think, and as we're seeing through a lot of merger activity at the moment, it's overcrowded and under aggregated. And with the small cable channels that survived so well for decades, they only survived because they were in the basic cable package on their cable systems or satellite systems or whatever they were, and that's falling away. And so it's everybody fighting in a shark-infested sea for the eyeballs, which means it's terribly easy for consumers to churn away. So understanding that next best action for a consumer and retaining them, growing them, is going to be crucial. More crucial than the load balancing of video demand.
Oh yeah, the barriers for a consumer, the barriers to entry and the barriers to exit are so much lower, aren't they? I mean, they can get on and off. The churn rates are very high, and there is a completely. it definitely requires our OTT providers to have a completely different mindset around how to reduce that churn rate and how to retain those subscribers.
And I think that this is obviously one of the overall potential, right? That we will see. I'm guessing that you will at AWS will have more CMOs and more CFOs looking at their overall engagement. And I mean, we all see the outcome first mindset being applied. We're almost up on time. I wanted to thank you both for being with us. We learned through, what are the first steps for looking at your TCO. You can also have a look in the note of the podcast at a report that was created in collaboration with Merapar on the future of TCO, where we summarize what we believe is the way to get started on this new TCO design strategy. And just to finish, what are the key things that you, I just as a side note, I looked at an AI strategy slide I did 4 months ago, and then I realized that I had to change it again. So by the way, this is going to be a journey. I did that today, and I was like, damn, I need to change it. This is not relevant anymore. So we will do the other version of the report as well to make sure we adapt over time in our understanding. But before we leave, I mean, Michael, Simon, one last fun or crazy idea that you've seen with AI, things that you are looking towards to hear how this developed, anything that you want to share at the top of your mind?
Yeah, I'll go. I mean, it's something that is our mantra inside Merapar is that as we get excited about extraordinary capabilities of the AI engines, agents, infrastructures that we're seeing and their capabilities. My daughter is an architect, and she says about building materials and building infrastructure and everything else like that. You still need good design, and you still need great electricians and brilliant plumbers, and you need to get it right from the ground up so that all of that wonderful functionality can really shine and deliver great consumer experience. So that balance of grounded software engineering, which the three of us know so well, and we've been trained in, supporting and allowing the dance of the AIs above us somehow. So that's my thing: is get that balance right, and not to get a little bit head crazy with all the flashy new lights.
Fantastic! Thank you both for joining me today on this podcast.
Thank you, Bluin.
That's all for this episode. Thank you very much to both Michael and Simon for joining, and thank you to Bluin for leading the conversation. If you'd like to learn more about the conversation topics, we'll attach a link to the report in the description of this episode. If you have any questions or you'd like to reach out, feel free to send us an email at playback.podcast@exito.tv or reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you like what you heard, please feel free to like and subscribe. That's all for this episode. Thanks, and we'll catch you next time.